Well, thank you very much. Wow. I've spoken at over 200 major conferences, and never have I spoken in a movie theater before, and never have I had a warm-up act, let alone such a fine musician and guitar player and singer. Thank you. I was very pleased to be invited to speak at this conference, but I do have a hidden agenda, which I'll tell you about at the end of my talk. But I'm very pleased to be in Vilnius. I've been here once before and very pleased to be back again. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is test automation blunders. Do you know what a blunder is? Have you ever blundered? Well, a blunder comes from the Old Norse word blundra, and it means to shut your eyes. Our word blind comes from the same source. Now what it means is something like a mistake caused by ignorance or carelessness or not thinking things through. So we're doing something wrong, and we do things wrong because we don't see or we don't understand. So I have quite a number of blunders here for test automation, and we'll start with the first one, which is that testing tools test. Actually, that's not correct. Can the sound be turned down a bit? It's a bit boomy. Right, so this blunder, to think that testing tools actually do testing, this is at the root of many of the other blunders as well. Why do we call them testing tools? The tools don't do the testing. Better names for them would be tester assistance tools, or check running tools, or test execution tools, or my favorite would be not test running tools, but partial support for some aspects of test execution and comparison tools. Now, if any tool vendors would like to take me up on that, I'm happy to let them use that name for the tools. Because thinking of test execution, and I'm thinking mainly of system-level test execution, that's what they do. It's partial support. It helps, but they don't run tests. What are people like? Well, we had some inspiration about how powerful people are and how powerful communication is. People think, we evaluate, we assess, we decide things, we observe, we interpret, we recognize patterns. You can pick out someone's face in a crowd. I see someone I know just there. Now, all these faces, how do I know that recognize that one person? People are good at that. Computers are getting around to it, but it's taken a long time, and they can be confused like putting on a hat or glasses, which people aren't. People also have new ideas, people find bugs, and people make mistakes. This can sometimes be quite an advantage. What do these tools do? Actually, the test execution tools, all they do is they just run stuff. That's it. They run whatever they've been programmed to run, including bad tests, by the way. The intelligence level of a testing tool is absolute zero. The testing tool will not think. I think we should get tools to do what computers do best and let people do what people do best. That way we get the best of both worlds. So looking at the tasks involved in testing, we identify what to test, we design the test, we build the test, we execute a test, and we check the results. Now, the earlier activities are more intellectual in nature. The later ones are more clerical in nature. Plus, what are the things that we repeat more often? Well, it's the latter things, isn't it? The execution of the tests and the checking of results. So we're doing that many times, and it's clerical. Let's see. What do computers do best? Yes, that's why it's good to automate that type of activity. But the other ones are more often a one-off activity, and they are the ones that determine the quality of the test. So who needs GPS? How many of you here have GPS? Anybody there? Oh, that's better. Now, what's the first thing you do when you get in the car and you're going somewhere after you've turned it on? Where to go? Put in your destination. Exactly. If you don't know where you're going, any road will do. Lewis Carroll said that. I think that's quite appropriate. But where are you going with your test automation? A lot of people have no idea. A lot of people have never thought about what the goals should be for test automation, have never thought about what they're actually trying to achieve and why. Why are we doing it? Oh, everyone's doing it. It's fashionable. That's not a good reason. So testing and automation are different activities, and they need different goals. So what are good objectives for testing? Things like finding bugs, gaining confidence, or investigating things. Those are not the goals for automation, because automation is different. They are different. They are not the same. What type of testing finds the most bugs between regression testing and exploratory testing? Louder? Exploratory, absolutely. If you want, by its very nature, what is regression testing? Regression testing is running tests that have happened before, and they passed last time. Actually, they should be called anti-regression, because we're checking that they haven't regressed, but we call them regression tests. So they are much less likely to find a new bug when they're run for a second time. It's when you run a test for the first time that you're most likely to find a bug. However, what is it that's most usually automated? Regression tests, exactly. Now, one of the prime mistakes made in looking at what the objectives for automation should be is to say we should find lots of bugs. And that is not correct. But automation does not find bugs. Automation just runs tests. It's the tests that find the bugs. And any single test, whether that test is automated or manual, the bug-finding ability of that test is roughly the same. Automating it does not make it better at finding bugs. It may make it worse, actually. So finding bugs can actually be a dangerous objective for test automation. Now, at one conference I went to, at the lunch break, I sat next to a guy who hadn't been to a testing conference before. He turned out to be a fairly high-level manager, and we got chatting, and I asked him about the test automation he had. And he said, well, yeah, I've got a team working on it. They're doing regression tests. They're running tests every weekend and every night, but I'm thinking of knocking it on the head. Oh, why? It's not finding many bugs. We had a frank and full discussion at that point. Now, in the book Experiences of Test Automation, one of the chapters in there, the guys had actually analyzed the percentage of bugs found by different types of testing. Automated tests, manual tests, exploratory tests, and fix verification, bug fix tests. Do you think that's evenly distributed, 25% each? No, you're right. I'll give you a hint. The fix verification was about 8.4%. The rest evenly distributed, do you think? What about the manual scripted testing? Want to put a guess for a number there? 15? Pretty good guess. It was actually better than that. It was 24%. So we got two left. Half and half, do you think? No way. Exploratory, 58%. Now, if you're really good at maths, you can figure out that the remaining percentage for the automated test was only 9.3%. That doesn't sound like much. This manager that I talked to had probably seen something like this and thought, those automated tests, they're not doing any good. They're not finding many bugs. Because he thought the objective of automation was to find bugs. The objective of some forms of testing is to find bugs, particularly exploratory testing. So what happens when it comes along and says, no, we're not going to do any automated testing anymore because it's not finding many bugs? Will we be finding more bugs, do you think, in the exploratory now? No, we won't, because the people who were freed from doing that regression testing to do exploratory testing now have to go back and do the regression testing manually. The differences between effectiveness and efficiency. If you have slow testing, you think to yourself, we must be more efficient. Let's automate. That will give us fast testing. Yes, that's true. However, what about the quality of that testing? If you have poor quality slow testing and you automate that, you will just get poor quality fast testing. Automating chaos just gives you faster chaos. What we really want to have is good quality testing, and that's more important. And then we automate those things which are good to automate from the set of good tests. So most people start off here and end up going here, but that's not a good place to be. You're much better off improving your testing rather than automating what you have and then automating what's suitable from that. Excuse me. Okay, the next blunder is the silver bullet syndrome. I'm sure you've heard of this. The silver bullet solution, we just have to get the right tool. I wish I had £1 or €1 for every time somebody said, what's the best tool? Because that's the wrong question. There is no such thing as the best tool or the right tool. Let me ask you, what's the best car? What was that, a Ford? Four? Ah, very good. The best, you're ahead of me. But supposing, just take a moment and think, supposing you could have any car you like, you've won a prize, money's no object, whatever car you desire, you can have. What are you picturing? Is it something like this, perhaps? Maybe for some of you, yeah. Well, now my son-in-law, who's also a tester, by the way, he's a classic car fan. So maybe for him, that would be the best car. But if you've got 5 children and 2 dogs, then you want something like this. So the best car for what is exactly the right question. And it's the same thing with the tools. What's the best tool? Well, we have the cost, and we also have some benefits that we get with a tool. And where do you want to be? There's a perception that commercial tools are up here. Well, yes, you pay a lot, but you get good quality. And that open source tools are down here. This may be changing, but this is certainly a perception in many large organizations. But I have seen organizations where they've got commercial tools and they paid a lot of money, but they didn't get good results. And I've seen many organizations where they've got open source tools, so they didn't pay a lot, and they got good results. The key is to invest in the automation itself and make that of better quality. We should perhaps say moderate cost rather than low cost. And if you do that, then whichever type of tool you've got, you will get better results. And there's also perception, the silver bullet perception, that success is automatic. All you need to do is get the tool and then just wind it up and let it go. Well, it certainly isn't like that, is it? Automation is much more than just a tool. It takes time and effort to succeed. Building good automation is not something that happens instantly. It's a learning process. Management support for automation is critical. The manager I talked to was about to pull the rug out from under the automation, and that automation was going to die. If you don't have management support to do good automation, your automation will not be successful. So managers need to understand the limitations of automation, its capability, what they need to invest, and what they can expect, and when. Because otherwise they expect they put no investment in and they get instant results. That's magic, that's not test automation. And the other thing is people issues. It's people who are using the tools, and people issues are very important when you're trying to introduce test automation into an organization. Now, a lot of people actually automate the wrong thing. Should we be automating? I've often seen people will say for their automation, they want to automate X% of the tests. And X somehow comes out at 100 every time, right? Let's automate all of our tests. I've seen, there's a phrase out there, automate all the things, all the tests. That's wrong. That's not. So here we have our tests, our manual tests, and these are the automated tests. So in between, we have the number of tests that we've automated so far. Should we be trying to move those circles together so that we've automated more of those manual tests? Well, actually, no, we should not. Of the tests that we haven't automated yet, there are probably some, and maybe some that we already have automated, that should not be automated. Some tests should be manual. Things like, would the users really do that? Yes, you can program in a test that a user might have done once, but that doesn't explain all of user behavior forever. Have you ever said to yourself, who would have thought the users would do that? Exactly. And if you haven't thought of it, you can't put it into the tool. What about, CAPTCHA, where you have to say, I'm not a robot? The point of that is to prove that you are not a computer. So if your automation tool can do that, your CAPTCHA's broken, right? Now, I know there are ways around it, but. And what about, do these colors look nice? That's not something that, the number of times I go on a website and I find that the things are just overlapping. Well, I've got quite a small screen on my laptop. They obviously haven't tested it on that, or on a mobile phone or a tablet. One of the stories in the automation books was a guy who was really keen on automating. He was determined to automate this one test. So he spent half a day on it, a day, 2 days, 5 days, still wasn't really working properly. Another week, 10 days he'd spent on this one test trying to get it automated. It still wasn't actually perfect. And this test would have taken half an hour to run manually and was only needed once a year. Was that a good test to automate? I don't think so. So look at what's good to automate and what isn't. Actually, Angie Jones has a spreadsheet, which I could send you if you want it, to help you decide which tests to automate. But there's another aspect to this. Looking at just automating what's a manual test now is not a good idea, partly because automated tests are different to manual tests, but also, if you only look at automating your manual tests, you're missing a trick. There are things you can do with automation that you can't do manually. There's additional verification that you can look at. If you're testing manually, you see what's on the screen and say, oh, that looks about right. But are all those GUI objects in the right state? Easy to check with a tool. So there are things that you can do. There's also some types of testing that you can do automatically, which you cannot do manually. Not just load and stress testing. There's a thing called high-volume automated testing. I heard a presentation by Harry Robinson where he was testing Bing, the operating system. That's a pretty big thing to test, right? And they had a way of automating sort of random inputs, finding partial automated oracles to compare to them, and they were enabled them to do a lot of testing. Not exact, is this exactly the right thing, but is it in the right ballpark? So partial oracles rather than full ones. Now, the most important thing, another area where people automate the wrong thing, is looking at the testware architecture. This is probably the most important technical aspect of automation. And a poor architecture is what normally gives people high maintenance costs and leads to automation being abandoned. So there are 2 layers of abstraction. If we have our testers up here and the test execution tool is down here, if you do nothing but just say, here you are, testers, here's a testing tool, go, then in effect, you have no testware architecture. You're just adopting the tools. But 2 layers of abstraction are key. And the first one is at the technical level. You want to abstract out anything technical, anything to do with the tool, build your automation scripts in a way that follows good programming practices. So they're structured, they're modular, and that way you will, it's building code. But if you give a tool to testers who aren't coders, remember back in the days we used to write spaghetti code? Anybody here old enough to remember that? I wrote my very first project. I wrote a test execution tool, and it was spaghetti code. After I left the company, it was never used again. I think I wrote the world's first shelfware. But if testers don't know good design principles, they will write spaghetti testware. So it's very important to have it well designed. And if you do that, then your automation will survive more than one release of your software. It will survive more than one release of the testing tool. And it will have a long life. The other layer of abstraction is to do with who's using the automation. If it's only developers using it, that's a different story. But if you want to have, say, business analysts or users able to write tests which can then be run automatically, you need to build the automation to make that possible. And you do that by having, perhaps you call it a domain-specific test language. High-level keywords is a good way to implement that. And if you do that, then anyone can come in and write a test which can then be run automatically. Now, it does require keyword scripts to be there to implement every keyword, but if those scripts are not yet written, those tests could still be run manually when the documentation is in the same form. Now, if you don't think about the architecture of your tests when you start, you will be tied to the tool. And if you've bought a tool, your tool vendor will be delighted because now you're stuck with them. But for your own benefit, you may think this tool is perfect for us. Why should I worry about changing tools? This tool is great. Yeah, it is now. But what about in 2 years' time? What about in 5 years' time? Maybe your stuff has moved on, has changed dramatically, and the tool hasn't kept up. So plan to change a tool right from the start, because you will, unless it dies too soon, but then that's probably because you haven't thought about changing it. Now, our first book, which is called Software Test Automation, chapter 5 in that is the one on testware architecture, and I'm happy to email that to you if you like, or do buy the book. Now, this next point I will illustrate with a little video clip, which is advertising something that some of you might not even remember. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it.
Life is great and life is fine, 'cause I met a girl and no one likes you. You're annoying me a lot now. You know, we've got so much in common. We like eating, drinking, yoga. Yoga? Shh. I'd like to go to a yoga class. Beginner. I see myself as more of an intermediate, actually. A bunch of ladies going, how hard can it be?
Bringing the arms behind the back into prayer position. Don't forget to breathe.
That's chiropractors. CHIROPR.
How many of you here remember Yellow Pages as a physical book? Oh, a few, okay. I love that ad. Anyway, how hard can it be? He says, bunch of ladies going, I recently went to a yoga class, and I was amazed at how hard it was. But anyway, this is the attitude people have to automation. How hard can it be? But different activities require different skills. Not everybody can be a tester. Not everybody can be a test automator. The classic blunder is just to let the testers automate, which I showed you with the architecture. And then we've got people who are automating without automation skills. But a newer one, now that we have multidisciplinary teams, we're going to let the automators write the tests. Because who needs testers? Because the automators can write the tests, because they're automating the tests. And now we have people writing tests who don't know anything about testing. And I don't think that's good either. Now, I know in a multidisciplinary team, often you have people doing both roles, and that's fine. My son-in-law does both testing and automation. I have no objections to that. But if you are trying to be both a tester and an automator, that can be difficult. So you come into work one morning and you say, let's see, I'm going to do some manual testing today. And you go and you run through a bunch of tests because you've got a deadline coming up and you've got lots of tests you have to get through. So at the end of the day, you think, I did a good job today. I ran 25 tests. I found 15 bugs. Good day. But I didn't do any automation. So the next day you come in and you say, I'm going to be an automator today. So you sit down and you automate 5 tests. And at the end of the day, you think to yourself, I did a good job today. I automated 5 tests. These scripts have been designed in a good modular way. They're going to be easy to maintain. They're going to be resilient to change. But I only did 5. Now your manager comes along and he says, You know, there's a deadline coming up. Yeah. Well, you only did 5 tests today. Ah, but I automated them. We'll be able to run them really quickly from now on. Oh, that's true, he says. We'll carry on doing 5 a day and I'll push the deadline back. Yeah? Never, right? Even though automation is better long term, deadline pressure pushes people back into just doing manual testing and not doing the automating. So that's the difficulty if you're trying to do both things, if one person has those 2 different roles. Anybody here experience that? Yeah. Right. Now, there's also a conception, particularly by high-level managers who don't know any better because no one ever told them, that tools will replace testers. Anybody heard that? Yeah, right. We can reduce the number of testers once we have the tools. I'd like to ask, and perhaps you could ask your managers this, what are your testers like? When they go in to do the testing, do they follow detailed scripts and deviate neither to the left nor to the right and just do exactly what it says on the page without ever putting their brains in gear? Well, in that case, I think you have mindless morons. And okay, that can be automated. But if your testers are different, if your testers are people who are intelligent investigators, if your testers, when you're running through a test, are thinking, I know it says that, but I don't think that's right. I'm going to go off and dive into the undergrowth here. Or, we haven't thought of this, we must test this. No tool is ever going to say, I haven't thought of testing that. So if your testers are like that, then no tool will ever replace them. So we need more skills, not fewer skills. Automation is good because it can free the testers to do more manual testing, more exploratory testing, and to do more test design for the automated tests. And therefore, they find more bugs. It's not the automation that found the bugs, though. The automation enabled the testers to find the bugs. I think that's an important distinction. So remember, the tools don't replace testers, they support them. We can't start automating yet because the application isn't stable, especially the GUI. I think that's a myth. And I think it's a throwback to attitudes to testing from 30 years ago. Oh, we can't start testing until the software is written. The testing comes at the end. And testing is only test execution. Well, we all know now that's not true. We can start testing right from day one when someone has an idea about what they want this app to do. The testers can start asking questions and saying, what if it isn't? Have you thought of this? That's testing. Testing is more than testing. Testing is more than test execution. And automation is also more than just running the automated tests. The automation needs to be designed. The automation could start right from the beginning. If you design the automation early so that it's ready to run when the system is then ready, then you will get better results. Then you will be able to get the benefit from the automation. So when should you write the automated tests? You're probably familiar with the test automation pyramid. Mike Cohn, Lisa Crispin refers to it in chapter 1 of our Experiences book. And in there they say more number of unit tests, component tests, should be automated, partly because they're easy to automate at that level, fewer of the middle layer, the API, and even fewer at the GUI level. But notice we still have manual testing on the top of the pyramid as well. But it's this idea that you can't automate the GUI testing that I want to challenge. See this instability of the application as an opportunity rather than as a problem. Yeah, okay, the system's unstable. Once your system is released, is it then never going to change? Of course not. It's going to be subject to constant change. It's always going to be unstable. And the way it's unstable now might be the way that it's going to be unstable for some time to come. So build in the flexibility and the robustness so that your automation is resilient to change. If, for example, your developers commonly move things around on the screen, so your automation can't find them, well, don't automate by position, automate by object. If they haven't named the objects, then name them yourself and use a translation table. I think that's the object map pattern. So which aspects are stable, you can automate those. And if the GUI is often late, you can execute the tests for the stable parts, but you can also build the tests now and execute them later. And if you have the detail abstracted out from the tests, then that detail can go in at the last minute, and then the tests are ready to run. So see this instability as a challenge and an opportunity, rather than something to delay the automation. Another blunder is about regarding test automation as a project, or not as a project. If you don't think of automation as a project, then it may not be funded, may not be resourced. Just do it in your spare time. Has anyone been told that? Oh, just do the automation in your spare time? How many people here have spare time at work, or even at home, come to that? But of course, automation is a project in some respect, but in other respects, it's not a project. It's not just a project, because when will the automation be finished? That's a bit like asking, when will the continuous improvement be finished? It's continuous, it's never finished. The automation always has more to do to it. 6 months from now, your automation won't be just sitting there highly polished and totally completed and never need any changes. You'll probably need to refactor something. So it's not something that is finished like a project is. It's ongoing. And refactoring is important to do. In Lisa's chapter in our book, one of the things that she said is that one of the keys to their success was an agile project that they were automating, was every 6 months they devoted a sprint to refactoring their automation. And that was a key for them. In addition, they had great communication with their managers. So maybe you have a project to get started in automation and then continued support afterwards. Another blunder with automation is thinking that it's only to do with automating tests. In fact, we don't want to just have automated tests, we want to have automated testing. If we have, here we have manual process and automated process. On the left we have the automated tests. So we start out by selecting the test cases, and then we have to set up some test environment, and then for each test case set up whatever we need to. Now here we've got the automation in the middle there, and then we go on and we loop around, but that's mainly manual. Yes, there's some automation there, but it's buried in a manual process. In order to get the benefits from automation, you need to automate as much as possible around the test execution. So you want to automate the setup, automate the checking of results. You still need to select which tests to run and report defects. But you want to automate as much as possible so that you get the benefits from automated testing, not just automated tests. And isolationism. I see people being isolated from a lot of different things. One is being isolated from change, encasing your first efforts in stone. You might want to start off automation by running a small pilot project. And when you do that for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, you will learn things. You shouldn't say, right, we've automated those tests, those are done. We put them on lock them away in the filing cabinet, and that's how they stay forever. No, the learning you have will enable you to throw that away, do the next bit much better, because you now know what you're doing. And reviewing and refactoring is necessary for automation. Another thing people by the way, one thing I meant to say on the previous slide, it's also important for automated testing to think about automating anything at all that would be useful to people, not just to do with testing. Setting up things for other people, running tests for developers. Anytime you can think of a way that you can be helpful will be good. Isolation from realism. Now, this is a serious problem, and again, it seems to be something that higher level managers are more subject to. Optimism is not a good strategy for automation. Automated tests need to be tested as well. Automated tests are also software, and they have bugs in them. By the way, so do the tools. These tools must be tested, right? You'd be surprised. Well, maybe you wouldn't. But it's important to have realistic expectations and not just go on the basis of optimism. Managers, isolated from managers, it's important to make the benefits visible to higher level managers especially, because otherwise, like that guy I met at the conference, he doesn't realize what he's got because no one made it visible to him. Costs tend to become visible by themselves. Managers will see where people's time is being spent, but you have to make the benefits visible to them because they don't see them otherwise. So it's very important the way that you communicate, and you need to communicate with them in a way that is relevant to them, is at the right level, and is something that they will be ready and willing to take in. And developers, not collaborating with developers. Back in the old days, there used to be this over the wall where the developers would develop something and throw it over the wall to the testers. They would discover it didn't work at all and throw it back over the wall to the developers. And there was a real divide between, and an antagonism between testers and developers. Nowadays, I think that's almost completely gone, maybe not entirely, and we do much better by collaborating. But if you don't collaborate with the developers, you're making your job harder for yourself. For example, if you have a choice of what language you write the automated tests in, choose the one that the developers are using, because then you get a lot of support from them. When you have problems, you can go and ask them questions. And also, again, a lot of times the automators complain that the software isn't written for ease of testability by the automation. But if you get more involved with the developers, if you offer to run some tests for them, if you offer to help them with things, you're more likely to get them cooperating with you, understanding what the problems are, and you get better benefits. And isolation from the wider world. Not seeking existing knowledge. How many of you have read a book on testing? Oh, that's good. How many have read a book on test automation? That's not so many. There's some good books out there, by the way, and I'm going to tell you about another one in a minute. Articles, blogs. Yeah, that's a lot, isn't it? Discussions. I mean, you're all here at this event, so you're gaining knowledge here. The Test Automation Patterns is a wiki that I've been involved with a lady called Saretta Gamba, and that's free to use. We have about 50 issues and 80 patterns, and the patterns are ways of doing automation which has worked for other people. So that's a free resource for anyone doing test automation, and I would encourage you to go and look at that. Now, before I sum up, I'll let you into my hidden agenda for coming to Lithuania this week. And that is that I sing in a choir. It's called the John Paul Singers. This was taken 2 years ago in Slovenia. That's me over there. And we have a tour of Lithuania next week. So these are the concerts, and I have some flyers here. I'd be delighted if you take a flyer and come to the concerts. Sometimes when we've done these concerts, we have very few people come. We once had a concert where no one came, except for the hangers-on. We all enjoyed it immensely, but it is nice to have people in the audience. So that was when I discovered this conference was the week before the tour. I was absolutely delighted to be here at this conference. Okay, that's the commercial break over. Now, summarizing these blunders, we looked at quite a few of them. So first of all, testing tools don't test. They just run stuff. Who needs GPS? Well, automation does need direction. It needs objectives, and it needs objectives that are different to the objectives for testing. There is no silver bullet. It needs time and effort. Don't automate the wrong thing. you need a testware architecture to make sure you structure your automation well. Don't just automate manual tests, because you will miss benefits if you don't think about what the tools can do that you can't do manually. And don't automate all the manual tests either. How hard can it be? It needs different skills. The skills for doing automation are different to the skills for doing testing. By the way, it's popular now to say the only good tester is one who can write code. I actually object to that. I think it's great if they can, but I think if you tell people you're no good unless you write code, you are doing a disservice to the testing skills of a lot of people out there who are really good at testing and don't want to write code. And I think that's bad. But anyway, I'll get off my high horse. Now, the stable application myth we looked at, see that as an opportunity to build in flexibility. It is a project at times, because it does need funding and resourcing, but it's ongoing. It's not just a project. Automation is more than automation. Think about automating everything around the execution and other things, and don't be isolated. Collaborate with with developers, educate managers, experiment, read, and keep learning. So these are my coordinates. The book Experiences of Test Automation. If you want the e-book, there's a discount. And the new book, this is a first-time announcement for this. I already mentioned the wiki on the test automation patterns. We are actually releasing a book called A Journey Through Test Automation Patterns. That will be released mid-November. And it is a story of a team with lots of problems and how they've solved their problems using the patterns. So it's not quite a novel, but it is a storybook. We've had really great feedback from various people like Lisa Crispin and Ellen Page who really liked the book. So we hope that you will buy that one as well and enjoy it. And I think that's me. Thank you very much.